Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. Hey everyone, I am really excited about this episode. But before I do that, I wanted to say thank you so much for the emails and the reviews. In particularly, one of the pieces of the feedback I got was that I got to try to talk a little bit more slowly, which I will definitely work on. It is something that I've struggled with all my life because when I get excited, I tend to speak super fast and the guests get me excited. So I am going to definitely work on that. Thank you so much for that feedback. But I also like to really thank SO1222 from Canada for a really amazing review. I am so grateful that anyone takes time to write an email or put a review on iTunes or Google Play or wherever it is. So this one came from, So1222 from Canada, and it said, listen, there's a gap in identifying the innovators in Canada. Love her interviewing style and how she really gets in depth with her guests. Keep it up. Thank you so much. So 1222. I really wish it kind of gave names, but I really do appreciate it. Honestly, you can tell from my voice, it kind of crackles and I actually get really super excited and juiced. So this episode's really interesting to me because I get to chat with Nicole, and she is really amazing. I mean, I know I say that about all the guests, but this one is really interesting because her and I met at a podcast movement conference last year, and we were just kind of chatting, and we just hit it off. And we actually spent quite a bit of time just chatting about different challenges we're facing, opportunities, just things that made us giggle, and we actually had developed a really nice friendship. And I get so much value from every time I talk to her because she's been around in this industry for quite some time about how to really elevate your brand and connect with audiences that matter. So it didn't actually clue in until about, I think, 6-7 months after our friendship had blossomed that I was like, well, why don't I get you on the podcast? And honestly, I was so happy that she was able to find time because not only was she doing like so many things, she was about to do a huge relaunch. She's got a 7-day-a-week show, and there was just a lot of craziness happening, and she managed to kind of fit us in to put this together for us. And I think you'll really enjoy this. There were some really cool key learnings from this episode. We talk about the importance of personal brand, even if you are working in your own company or you're working for somebody or whatever it is, but you do need to have a personal brand. And people want to connect and understand people behind any sort of brand these days. There's a level of transparency that is really driving things. And you could see that in the news. More and more people are talking about things that weren't talked about before. So it's really important about connecting with those that have the same values as you. And it's interesting because, I think back about early days and we talked about more about people have experiences. But now companies, even when they're looking for employees and stuff, they're looking for same values. And, and so people really want to understand what you're really about because that way they understand what motivates you. So we talk about all these things and how being original can really elevate your brand, how transparency fits into things. Then we get into talking about podcasting and how Seth Godin has actually described podcasting as the new blog. Seth Godin is a massive marketing genius out there. So, we talk about how it's important to serve first and provide value, and really how podcast guesting can elevate your brand and really connect with a different type of audience. So I think you're going to find a lot of value, and I can't wait to get your feedback on this. And again, thank you so much for the review from So1222. I really, really, truly appreciate it. And for all of our listeners out there, I am really grateful for your time. And if you enjoy this episode, feel free to share any of the other episodes too in the blogs. And we're trying to work on our newsletter to kind of get it out all the time. And I would love to get feedback on that. I really always appreciate it. Anyways, take a listen to this episode. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Innovators, I'm super, super excited and pumped. In fact, this interview has been rescheduled and scheduled because we ended up doing girl talk about other stuff as opposed to actually doing this interview. So I've got Nicole Holland in the house. Now, For you guys that don't know her, you are missing out, and you're about to not miss out anymore, because she was actually named in the Huffington Post as one of the 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs in 2017. She's been interviewed in over 100 trending podcasts, featured in publications as Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, you name it, she's been there. And honestly, she is so brilliant beyond belief. She provides elite level done for you podcast publicity services and consults on strategic visibility to help innovate thought leaders, disruptors, and change makers, and increase their brand recognition, credibility, and profitability. Like, honestly, Nicole, you are such a force to be reckoned with. I am so excited, and honestly, a little bit of a girl fan. I have definitely become a girl fan knowing you, because you are just so amazing. So welcome.
Thank you. I am a huge fan of yours as well. It's been so much fun since we met, and it's like soul sisters.
It's so crazy. It is so crazy that we've only known each other for not that long. And I have to tell you, you are rightly recognized as 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs, because in the short time I have got to know you, I have learned so much stuff from you. It's amazing how much value you provide and how much coaching you provide, and I just cannot say thank you enough. You are absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
So let's start at the beginning. We always hear about the importance of building a business and our own personal brand. Why is brand recognition and credibility so important for business owners and thought leaders today?
Well, I mean, you just said it, right? In my intro, you quoted a few things, and to be honest with you, it's a little outdated. I should have updated that, but it'll be updated recently. It'll be updated soon. But yeah, like all those credibility markers, if I didn't have those, I would just be another consultant, another coach, another publicist, right? Like it's important to build your personal brand so that people know you. And what used to be the way to do it was you put a brand into know. And nowadays, social media especially has made it so, what's the word? I don't know if easy is the word, but social media has put such an importance on knowing people, knowing about the people, knowing, figuring out who you're dealing with rather than the brand, knowing who's behind the brand, what they stand for, what their mission is. And, also, even if you look at kind of things that people do that are not so good and they get in the news and they everybody is like, I am never working with that company because of this thing that their CEO did, right? Or their founder did. Whereas you have other companies that you may not normally even think about, but then you find out that their company values include values of your own, and it makes you want to work with them. So I think it's really important that in this day and age, people behind the brand come front facing and forward.
I love that. And it's really interesting because that whole notion of being a bit more transparent, like it's amazing how many times I see salespeople trying to sell to me. And I'm like, but I don't know you. Like, I don't know anything about you. And, and I try to go and look at their videos and find out a bit about them. And I know nothing about them. And I feel a little uncomfortable. And it's kind of neat, like to your point about social media has kind of really changed that landscape. So I can imagine there's a lot of mistakes that people make. Is there kind of some frequent mistakes that we all kind of make that you could tell us how to fix it?
Well, in terms of branding, I don't think there's any kind of general thing that people do wrong. Present your best self, right? But you have to also do it, I think, with authenticity these days. It's not something that you can just say, we stand for X when you're doing the opposite. Like, again, with social media and technology and the news, like people are going to know if you don't stand for X, right? That's going to come out. So you have to be authentic. And willing to let your guard down. I remember a few years back, it was in my space, which is the online marketing space. You really had people expected polished videos, like videos that were professionally taken and they were professionally produced and they were scripted and all that. But now people prefer those kind of bouncy videos that you're taking on a cell phone, you know, that you're, it look like there's a lot of businesses who actually pay producers to help them create those videos that are scripted, but they look like they're just off the cuff. They look like they're just day in the life kind of things. And so that's really, I think more of what people are looking for right now at time of recording is they want to believe you. They want to see behind the scenes. They want to see, would they want to spend the day with you? So I think when you're considering how to put yourself out there and kind of be the face of your brand, the first thing is whoever is getting out there needs to do some interpersonal work to be ready for that. What I find, because when I'm working with folks on getting more visibility and doing podcast guesting, as I call it, which is where you're on podcasts that your ideal buyers are listening to, or even in mainstream media, right? The thing that gets most people stuck is that they have an idea of how people want them to be, and it's incongruent with how they want to be. And so I would recommend that anybody who's going to get out there and be the face of their brand first does that interpersonal work to make sure that their true self and their forward-facing self are in alignment. And then you got to get out there.
I love that because, you know, it's really funny. I was teaching my students at George Brown and we're talking about thought leadership and those pieces. And I was telling them about I'm not going to name names. There was a blog that I absolutely was in love with and I followed religiously. So when I actually met the guy, I was like fangirl. I guess I was like, oh my gosh, da da da. And then I met his personality and I'm like, wait a minute. You wrote these blogs? Because I didn't feel there was a real disconnect when I met the guy. And I'm like, what? Then it made me kind of have that question mark in between going, did he actually write this or was this somebody else? Because it just did not jive. That tone, that theme, all of that, it didn't resonate right.
Yeah, I think it's even like, it's kind of similar to dating if you think about it that way. You know, when you are dating or if you're married, you know, when you were dating, you go out with people who present one way and then after a little while you get to see the real them after all the impressive intentions kind of fall by the wayside. And I think that's what happens a lot of times with businesses. And I think it's harder to recover from something like that. If you are authentic and you put things out there and you make a mistake or something like that, people recognize that people make mistakes, right? We even recognize that systems make mistakes sometimes, but people are real, they're dynamic, they're human. Nobody's perfect. And making a mistake publicly, when you are willing to own it and when you, before the mistake, are authentic and people kind of feel like they get you and like you're like them, those are going to be your true followers and your true fans and your lifelong customers and clients. And when you have that trust with people, and then they find out that you did something, tried to hide it, cover it up, or all the time while you were, while they were building trust, while you were building trust with them, from them, it was all a front. You can't recover from that kind of thing. So it's important to really again, do that interpersonal work. Make sure that what you're putting out is truly you. There are definitely boundaries and borders of what is in the public eye and what is not in the public eye, what's kept private. And working with a publicist or a coach that's an expert in this area and visibility, it can be very, very helpful.
It's great. I love that you always talk about, I was reading one of your pieces about marching to the beat of your own drum. And this is one of the things, like, when people are looking for jobs and when they're looking at, they're, publishing a book or doing all those things, is how do people kind of get a chance, or do you need tips of how they can stand out a little bit more?
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to what we were just talking about. When people are job searching, when people are trying to get something from others, there's that kind of wall, like that, okay, I'm going to present what I believe is going to get me the results I want. When you can stop doing that. There's a time and place for those sorts of things, but you'll generally get more of what you want when you can show more of who you are and how you are, the way you live your life, the values that you stand by. When you can really be more of you, and if you are a hard rock fan or a metal fan, allow that to be a part of the conversation, right? Because people connect with people on things that are similar. And so don't fake things, right? Like allow your, people will say, allow your freak flag to fly, or, allow yourself to be 100% of who you are without trying to play anything down. And you'll find that your people resonate with you and champion you and want to support you more because they get you.
I love that. And we do. You want people to understand a little bit more of you. And on top of that, isn't that kind of better to show that, so that when you're looking at a company and the culture and all those things, you kind of know it's a good fit? Like, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you and so on. So you really be able to kind of play around with that. I love it. So I have to ask, okay, because I got to get into the meat of the other stuff because I'm dying to ask you. So I don't know if you saw, Seth Godin actually said that podcasting is the new blogging. Did you get a chance to read that or hear that? Oh, yeah. So he's talking about the power of the word and the audio and the voice is just growing so phenomenally that it is actually the new version of blogging. So do you have any thoughts about that? Or, because, you are in the podcast world and you are quite the podcast queen. So what's your take on it?
Well, I appreciate that. Podcasting has been a growing medium for quite some time, and it's really nearly reaching, what's the word? It's reaching a point where it's mainstream, right? We've got access to listen to podcasts in cars, on tablets, on our phones, all different devices. Pretty much anywhere you can get an internet signal, you can access free on-demand content about anything, pretty much. Like the podcast space is really anything you can imagine that you want to listen to be entertained, educated, or inspired. It's available to you. No matter how weird your niche is, it is there. And we have more and more podcasters starting every day. One of the things that happens oftentimes is when people say, I'm going to start a podcast, they don't really have a a solid plan, and they do what's called pod fade, where they get started and then they give up. Either it's too difficult, too time consuming, it's not what they expected it to be, what have you. So really in the directories, there are so many short-lived podcasts, and there's also a lot of podcasts that have not been produced for years, but we as the content creators, the podcasters, as long as we keep paying for hosting, those shows are still available to people. So that's also great, especially for content that's not time specific, but that's just lessons and yeah, like I think it's, on the one hand, very exciting to see this, from inside of the industry. On the other hand, when I work with folks, it's really about getting them, they're business owners, and it's about getting them more business. It's about making money at the end of the day and revenue generation. And so it does make it challenging for people to figure out if they want to be a guest, if they want to be interviewed, if they want to stand out as the expert in their field and really get known in a powerful way. It makes it harder for them to figure out, where should I be showing up? What podcasts should I be connecting with and pitching myself to, and how do I get on those? That's becoming harder and harder. The more people know about podcasts, the more we get flooded as podcasters with requests to be on our shows. And so the harder it is to get on.
Yeah, that podcast guesting has been getting a lot of buzz. Why do you think it's such a popular tactic?
Well, for one thing, it's quote, easy, right? I mean, I'm sitting here talking with you from the comfort of my living room. I don't have makeup on. I don't have to travel anywhere. I don't have to invest much. I just have my external microphone plugged into my computer. It cost me about $70. So like, that's it. There's very little barrier to entry. There's like practically no cost for a guest. And I think because of that, though, people get really lazy and they don't realize the opportunity that they have getting on a podcast and what that means from the other side, right? From the content creator and the host side, and all the work that they do to get people out there and get people on. But a lot of people say, you should be everywhere. You should be on every podcast, and you just need to get visible. And this is actually something I'm really staunchly against. I don't believe you should. If you are a business owner, right? Like, again, that's who I work with. I work with people who are in business, and your time is valuable. And I think that by getting out there everywhere without a clear plan of action and a clear understanding of who you're speaking to, you're wasting so much of your precious time, and it just doesn't make sense. So what I recommend is that you have a very clear plan of action of who do you need to reach, what shows are they listening to that have interviews, why do you want to be on that particular show, and then how can you give value first to the host before asking for a spot on their show. Oftentimes, I think even with you, I think you invited me on your show. I don't think I asked you to be on your show. And oftentimes that's what happens when you are looking to serve first. You'll get what you want. You'll get the visibility, right? Like, I think this is so flippin' exciting because I'm Canadian and I live in Southern Ontario, and almost all of the shows that I get invited to are in the States, And I've been on some shows that are international. I've been on a couple of Canadian shows, but no shows that focus on Canadian innovators. And so this was super exciting to me. And being introduced to a new audience and yeah, super exciting. But I never would have asked, right? It was because we had a connection. I provided value. You wanted to share me with your people. And that's the approach that I take with my clients. And it's a long-term strategy. There's no like quick fix. But when you put the time in and you give first, you'll find that people want to give to you usually, right? And so it's a much better position to be in. Here I am, Sapna, you're singing my praises from the first moment. So your audience knows that you trust me and your audience trusts you. It's a very different dynamic than have I just come on without building that rapport, without having your trust. I'm just another person, right? And I think that's very easy for the audience to pick up on. So yeah, if you want to get out on podcasts, I recommend that you're really, really intentional about that. And if you want help with that, of course, I'm happy to help.
It's crazy because I get so many requests to be on the podcast, like so many requests. And it drives me insane because I'm like, did they actually look at what I actually deliver? What's the value that I provide? Are they good? And I spend more time doing the due diligence than anything else to see whether or not they're the right fit for the audience. Because I only want cool people that are doing really exceptional things that are changing the landscape. Like when I first met you, I was like, oh my gosh, the amount of value that you're providing is amazing. But what you're doing is helping people get onto podcasts and get recognition and building their brand and credibility and everything else. And I'm like, there's not a lot of people that are doing that specifically. They talk about things in a very broad perspective, but you are actually really specific. And I loved that. But do you have some tips for those that want to get on a podcast? Like how can they present themselves to be a better or a great guest?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is doing their due diligence, right? You never, ever should be reaching out to a host that you haven't actually listened to their podcast and vetted them to make sure it's a right fit for you. Again, you want to get in front of your ideal buyers. It's not about just getting out on podcasts. It's about being really strategic and figuring out who do you want to reach? Why do you want to reach them? And what is it that you can do in order to get them to take a next step with you? And then you know that. So now all you have to worry about or all you have to focus on is figuring out what are they listening to. Now you figure out what they're listening to. You go and you check out those shows, you listen yourself, you ask, this is my kind of gauge, right? I ask myself and I ask, when I'm booking for clients, I'm like, these personalities, would they have fun having a drink together, having dinner together? And if the answer is yes, it's likely to be a good match. If the answer is no, then you can have a situation where, again, the host is the person the listeners trust. That's the person the listeners the listeners are tuning in for. And what happens oftentimes is that people will go on podcasts to deliver their information, but there's no engagement, there's no rapport between the host and the guest. And so they don't see results from the interview. They just say, okay, well, I got more exposure. You get more exposure, but wouldn't you want it to be great exposure opposed to exposure to an audience that feels like you're not connected? Take the time to do your due diligence. You can get creative, maybe send the host a little card or a little surprise at their office or something like that and say, loving the show. You can use social media to do that. But overall, you want to figure out how do you start a conversation with the host. A conversation not to pitch them, but a conversation to get their attention so they can get to know a little bit about you first, get their interest. It's just like dating, you have to woo them a little bit. Once you have their attention and you have a conversation, if it doesn't come up that they say, oh my gosh, you've got to be on my show, you're amazing, then it's not inappropriate for you to ask them, hey, are you currently accepting guest pitches? Right? It's a very simple question. And if you have the rapport, they will tell you what's the situation. They'll tell you, I'm so backlogged and, I've got people booked through the year, or they'll tell you I'm actually canceling the show soon, or they'll tell you I am, but here's the situation, right? And so that gives you that information to know what that next step is. And as long as you're taking the angle of long-term relationship building, like you won't fail, because even if you don't get on their show, there's so many opportunities. Maybe you will wind up masterminding together. Maybe you will wind up in doing some kind of business together. Maybe you will, ask them, hey, I want to increase my visibility. You're a podcast host. Do you know of anyone who I would be a great fit for their show that you'd be willing to introduce me to? Right? There's so many opportunities, but you have to start the relationship. That's where, in my opinion, that's where the value is. So yes, as you said before, people don't do it my way because people are looking at short-term they have short-term thinking. They're looking at get out and what's my intention? It's all about me. Whereas when I work with people, we look at how do we make it a win-win-win, a win for my client, a win for the host, and a win for the audience. And as long as we can say it's a win-win-win, it is.
Mm. I love that. Out of curiosity, Nicole, how did you get started in podcasting? Was this something like, you woke up and I want to be a podcaster? Like, how did your journey start, or your curiosity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so bizarre because I was actually a correctional officer here in Ontario. And when I quit my job, I had been a coach before. I had been in marketing before. And I knew that I wanted to work for myself. I knew I wanted to work from home, and I just had to figure out how to get clients. And so, after, I was really studying and learning the online marketplace, and then not liking it. I was really finding it upsetting because I felt like there's so many people telling one thing but not really delivering results, taking people's money and not really delivering anything. And I was very upset about that. And so I started what is called an online summit. It's sort of like a conference, but it's all virtual. So you don't have to go anywhere, but you can tune in and get the sessions. And so my first summit, I did 3. I held them annually for 3 years. My first summit was, I gathered 30 experts in 30 different marketing strategies and had them do masterclass sessions, which were, I interviewed them to really get the goods on how somebody could start out with a specific strategy, be it Twitter or Facebook groups or writing a book or whatever, right? Well, I had a guy on, his name is John Lee Dumas, and I interviewed him about this thing called podcasting. Now, I never had an Apple thing. I really didn't, I had no idea. I didn't know what a podcast was, but I figured out this is a hot topic in marketing. And so how can I help my audience? That's what they want to know, how to get, more visibility and all. So I interviewed him about this thing called podcasting. And when I was done, he told me I was great at it, seemed very natural, and that I should start a podcast. And I'm like, well, I don't I have no intention of starting a podcast. And he's like, it's much, much easier than summits. There's a, so, and I went, okay, well, this guy knows a thing or two. So I gave it some time till, after my summit. And then, yes, I decided, okay, why not? It'll be another marketing arm, right? It can't hurt. I'll get to interview people, which I really enjoy. And, we'll see what happens. But I had no clue how much I would fall in love with the medium, and had no clue that my whole business would really revolve around podcasting. Just really, it started within a year, because I started noticing who made a great guest and who made a not great guest. And it had nothing to do with their popularity or time in business or their success. And I started really taking note of the things that set people apart. And at the same time, I wanted to know what it was like to be behind the mic on the other side. So I started going on other people's shows to get that experience so that I could optimize the experience that my guests were having with me. And I geeked out on it and looked at how can I improve and improve and improve. And then I realized people don't notice these things. They don't know. And so I started telling people, I started connecting people. I'd have a great guest that really stood out, and I'd tell them, hey, if you'd like to be on more shows, I've got a few friends I think you'd enjoy. And I just started doing it naturally. And when I would have a guest on, I'd walk them through how to use their microphone best, or, how to do one thing or another. And people just started coming to me and asking me more and more. And I started writing about it. I started talking about it. And I started a program called Interviews That Convert in 2016. And it's just blown up from there. So, yeah, I love it. I love it, love it, love it.
Well, you're so good at it. Like, honestly, you're just brilliant beyond belief, because, when I think about all those guests that need to get on podcasts to, increase their visibility, to sell something, their exposure and all those things, you have a natural way of bringing the story out in people. So it doesn't feel like, what are they pitching? There's nothing. It just feels like a journey and something like, wait, I get that. So you are really naturally a born podcaster, and your voice is phenomenal. So I love talking to you. So last question, because I know your time is precious.
Very kind.
No, my God. Seriously, I can't believe how much I learned from you. Out of curiosity, does somebody have to have something of a product to sell to be on a podcast, or can anybody be on a podcast, or how does that, work?
That's a super question. So first of all, I want to say that I am very much against people selling on podcasts. It is not the way to do it. The podcast is the opportunity for you to connect with an audience. Now, I've mentioned before, if you want support, you can reach out, I can help you. That's fine. You can let people know that, and I think it's a disservice not to let them know that you can help them, because here they're going to get on a great interview, they're going to get all this information, they're going to get excited, and then they're going to be left to figure it out on their own, or go look up and find somebody that's not you. Because oftentimes it's funny, but we don't connect the person giving the information with the idea that that person can also help us personally, unless somebody tells them. So I think it's important to let people know that you can help them and how you can help them, but you don't go on with the intention to sell. A lot of people will do this with books. They want you to buy their book. That's what they tell you at the end. It's like, no. Or schedule a call with me so we can talk about working together. No. Just give value. So again, I work with innovators, disruptors, change makers, and thought leaders who are in business, and they are doing podcasts as a way to generate leads and revenue. That's yes. So with the people that I work with, yes, it's go on specifically to, this is lead gen, this is biz dev, right? So However, if somebody's listening and they're not in business, but they have a passion for something and they want to share, like sometimes you just are so passionate about something, you want to share your expertise, even though you're not making money from it. If that's you, there's nothing holding you back from doing the exact same things to get on those shows. And to share your value and to meet people who are like-minded. And yeah, absolutely. You do not have to have something to sell to be a podcast guest. However, if you are in business and you have something to sell, your guesting should be connected to your sales system and your funnel.
Oh, that's brilliant advice. I mean, what I love about you is that you are a natural born connector. Like you see stories and connections between people that you're like, what? I would never have made that leap. And so you really have that kind of visibility insight. So you are, yes, definitely force to be reckoned with and definitely someone to follow and learn. So I'm hoping everyone else is taking a lot of value from this. That's for sure. And finally, Nicole, how can people connect with you?
Great. Thank you so much. I hope people are taking value from this too. And, if they are, if you're listening and you've got some kind of nugget that's helping you, I'd love to hear about it. You can reach me on social. I love when people email me and tell me how my message, my shares, helped them. I love that stuff. So if you want to contact me, go for it. If you want to find out how I can help you, go for it. If you want to listen to my show, go for it. The best place to find all of that information is on my website, which is thenicoleholland.com. That's TheNicoleHolland.com. And I think people should, I know it's long, but just appreciate that it's much shorter than my former married name.
Don't worry, people. I have it all in the show notes. So you can just click and link and you'll be able to get to her pretty quickly. Now I'm curious about what your maiden name.
No, that is my maiden name. I went back to my maiden name.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Love it. Anyways, you've been an absolute serious pleasure. I can't wait to hear the feedback from the show because a lot of my listeners are very vocal. They send me notes and tell me what they love, and for sure they're going to love this one.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all the listeners. And Sapna, you're amazing. And I'm so excited to know you and to continue the conversation with you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in and tuning in this week. Next week, you got another really cool episode. I hope you enjoyed the sneak peek. I'm going to try to do this and see how this works. If you guys are interested, like the little sneak teasers, let me know. I'd love to hear back from all of you. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. And let me know if you know of another Canadian innovator that's doing something really cool around the world. Let's get them showcased. Or if there's an innovation trend that you would like to specifically focus on. Anyways, looking forward to hearing from all of you and talk to you next week. Cheers.